The night was calm, the kind where the hum of crickets and the occasional distant bark of a dog filled the air. Detective Sarah Chen leaned back in her patrol car seat, sipping lukewarm coffee from a thermos. Her partner, Officer Marcus Reed, tapped his fingers on the steering wheel absent-mindedly as they drove through the quiet suburban streets. Their shift was almost over, and both were looking forward to heading home after another uneventful evening. "Another slow night," Marcus said with a yawn, glancing at the dashboard clock. "I swear this town is too sleepy for its own good." Sarah chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Don't jinx it, Marcus. You know how these things work. The moment we say it's quiet, something big happens." As if on cue, headlights flashed. In their rearview mirror, a sleek black sedan zoomed past them, weaving dangerously close to the curb before speeding up again. The car didn't just speed, it raced, tires screeching as it blew through a red light without slowing down. Marcus sat upright immediately, his casual demeanor replaced by alertness. "Did you see that?" he asked, already reaching for the siren controls. "I did," Sarah replied, her voice firm. "Let's pull him over." Flipping on the sirens, Marcus maneuvered the patrol car behind the sedan. To their surprise, instead of pulling over right away, the driver seemed hesitant, glancing nervously into the rearview mirror multiple times before finally easing the car onto the shoulder of the road. Both officers exchanged a glance. Something felt off. "Stay sharp," Sarah murmured, grabbing her flashlight as she stepped out of the car. Marcus followed suit, his hand resting lightly on the grip of his holstered weapon. They approached the vehicle cautiously, peering inside. What they saw made their eyes widen slightly. Behind the wheel sat Deputy Chief Harold Grayson, the head of Internal Affairs, a man whose name commanded respect and fear within the department. Known for his stern demeanor and no-nonsense approach to discipline, Grayson was not someone anyone expected to see pulled over for reckless driving. He looked flustered, his tie loosened and his hair disheveled, completely unlike the polished figure everyone knew. "Deputy Chief," Sarah began, keeping her tone professional despite her shock. "Do you know why we pulled you over?" Grayson sighed heavily, rubbing his temples as though dealing with unruly children. "Detective Chen, Officer Reed," he said, his voice dripping with irritation. "This is highly irregular. I'm on urgent business. Can't this wait?" "It can't," Marcus interjected firmly. "You ran a red light and were speeding, significantly above the limit. We need to see your license and registration, sir." Grayson's jaw tightened, but he reached into his pocket reluctantly, handing over his credentials. As Sarah examined them, she noticed his hands trembling slightly. It wasn't enough to be conclusive, but it added to the strange vibe surrounding the situation. While Marcus radioed in the details to confirm the documents, Sarah took a closer look at the car. The windows were tinted darker than regulation, allowed, and there was something odd about the trunk. It appeared slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of what looked like dark fabric inside. "Was that a stain?" "Sir," Sarah said, pointing toward the trunk. "Is everything okay back there? Your trunk seems open." Grayson stiffened visibly, his earlier annoyance morphing into something harder to read. "It's nothing," he snapped, avoiding eye contact. "Just a broken latch. Can we hurry this along?" His defensiveness raised more questions than answers. Sarah glanced at Marcus, who gave her a subtle nod. Protocol dictated that they investigate further regardless of who was involved. "Sir, I'm going to have to take a look," Sarah said calmly but firmly. "We can't ignore potential safety concerns." Grayson's face reddened, and for a moment it seemed like he might argue. But then, with an exasperated sigh, he got out of the car and popped the trunk fully open. Inside, the officers found a mess. A duffel bag stuffed haphazardly with papers, a locked briefcase, and, most alarmingly, a dark patch on the carpet that looked suspiciously like dried blood. "What's all this?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but edged with suspicion. "It's none of your concern," Grayson barked, stepping forward as if to close the trunk himself. But Sarah blocked him gently yet decisively. "Actually, sir, it is our concern," she said, maintaining her composure. "If there's nothing wrong here, you'll understand why we need to check it thoroughly." For a moment, Grayson looked like he might explode. His fists clenched, and his breathing grew heavier. Then, as quickly as his anger flared, it subsided, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. "Fine," he said tersely. "Do what you must, but don't think this will go unnoticed." The weight of his words hung in the air, but neither officer backed down. This wasn't just a routine traffic stop anymore. It was something far bigger, and they could feel it in their bones. Whatever secrets lay hidden in that trunk, they were determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. As they stood there under the pale glow of the streetlights, the world around them seemed to shrink. The peaceful suburbia they had been patrolling moments ago now felt distant, replaced by the tension of the unknown. Little did Sarah and Marcus know, this single decision would set off a chain of events that would shake the very foundation of their department and test their resolve like never before. The precinct was unusually quiet when Sarah and Marcus returned with Deputy Chief Grayson in tow. The late-night calm of the station felt surreal, almost as if the building itself knew something monumental was about to unfold. As they escorted Grayson inside, heads turned. Officers who had been filling out paperwork or chatting idly fell silent, their eyes wide with disbelief. Seeing one of the most powerful figures in the department being brought in under such circumstances was unheard of. Grayson walked stiffly, his face a mask of simmering anger and thinly veiled anxiety. He muttered under his breath, though not quietly enough for Sarah and Marcus to miss it. "You two have no idea what you're getting yourselves into," he said, his voice low but laced with venom. "This isn't going to end well for either of you." Sarah ignored the comment, focusing instead on ensuring everything was done by the book. They couldn't afford any mistakes, not with someone like Grayson. Marcus, however, shot him a glance that bordered on defiance. "We're just doing our jobs, sir," he replied evenly. "If there's nothing wrong, then this will all be cleared up soon." Once inside an interrogation room, Grayson was asked to wait while Sarah and Marcus reviewed the items found in his car. The duffel bag and briefcase sat on the table between them, practically radiating tension. Neither officer spoke at first. The gravity of the situation pressed down on them like a weight. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "What do you think is in there?" he asked, nodding toward the locked briefcase. His tone was casual, but his knuckles were white from gripping the edge of the table. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, her brow furrowed in thought. "But whatever it is, it's making him nervous, and that's reason enough to find out." They began with the duffel bag, unzipping it carefully. Inside, they found stacks of documents, paperwork that looked official, but hastily assembled. Some pages crumpled and others stained with what appeared to be coffee or worse. Sarah picked up one sheet and scanned it quickly, her eyes widening as she realized what she was looking at. It was a ledger, detailing transactions that didn't match any legitimate police funding records. Names of high-ranking officials were scribbled next to large sums of money along with cryptic notes about deliveries and transfers. "Marcus," Sarah said sharply, holding up the page. "Look at this." He leaned over, his expression darkening as he read. This looks like embezzlement, but why would Grayson have this?" Before they could speculate further, Sarah noticed something tucked beneath the documents, a small flash drive. She held it up, turning it over in her fingers. "What? Do you want to bet this has more answers?" Just as she placed the flash drive aside, they moved on to the briefcase. It was locked, but Sarah spotted a tiny label on the side, "Property of City Archives." That alone raised red flags. Using proper protocol, they requested a locksmith from the evidence department to open it without damaging its contents. When the ICHI case finally clicked open, both officers froze. Inside were files marked classified and folders labeled with names they recognized: city council members, judges, even fellow officers. Among them were photographs of people meeting in dimly lit rooms exchanging envelopes filled with cash. There were also handwritten notes detailing surveillance operations, wiretap transcripts, and maps marked with locations Sarah didn't recognize. One document stood out, a memo signed by Grayson himself, authorizing illegal monitoring of journalists and activists. "This can't be real," Marcus whispered, flipping through the pages. "Grayson's involved in this?" How deep does this go? Sarah shook her head, her mind racing. We need to secure this evidence before anyone else finds out we have it. If word gets out... Her sentence trailed off, but Marcus understood. They both knew how dangerous this discovery was. Grayson wasn't just some rogue officer. He was the head of internal affairs, the very division responsible for investigating misconduct within the force. If he was corrupt, then who could they trust? As they worked to catalog the evidence, their phones buzzed almost simultaneously. Anonymous text messages appeared on both screens. Leave it alone. You don't want trouble. The timing was too coincidental to ignore. Someone already knew they were digging deeper. We're running out of time, Sarah said, her voice tight with urgency. Whoever's behind this won't stop at threats. Marcus nodded grimly. So what's the plan? We can't exactly take this upstairs. Not yet. Not until we know who else might be involved. Sarah hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the interrogation room where Grayson sat stewing. She knew they were walking a razor-thin line. On one hand, they had damning evidence that could expose corruption at the highest levels. On the other, they were risking their careers and possibly their safety by pursuing it. But backing down wasn't an option. Justice mattered more than fear. We keep documenting everything, she said finally. Every piece of evidence, every step we take. If things go south, at least we'll have proof we acted in good faith. While they worked, Grayson grew increasingly agitated in the interrogation room. He demanded to speak to his lawyer multiple times, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. His demeanor shifted constantly, from outrage to desperation to icy calm, as if trying to decide which tactic would work best. Eventually, his lawyer arrived, a sharp-dressed man named Daniel Pierce, known for his ability to dismantle cases against powerful clients. Pierce strode into the room with an air of superiority, shaking hands with Grayson before addressing Sarah and Marcus. My client insists this is a misunderstanding, he said smoothly. Whatever you think you found, I assure you it's being taken out of context. Release him immediately, or I'll file charges for unlawful detention. Sarah met his gaze steadily, refusing to back down. Mr. Pierce, your client was pulled over for reckless driving. During the stop, we discovered suspicious items in his possession. Until we determine whether they pose a threat, we're following standard procedure. Pierce's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. Then perhaps we should discuss this further, with higher-ups present. Surely Deputy Chief Grayson deserves that much respect. It was a thinly veiled threat, and both officers recognized it for what it was. But Sarah and Marcus had come too far to back down now. They exchanged a glance, silently reaffirming their commitment to seeing this through. As the hours ticked by, the tension in the precinct became palpable. Officers who once greeted Sarah and Marcus warmly now avoided eye contact, whispering among themselves. Some openly glared, clearly unhappy with the direction things were heading. Even their captain seemed uneasy, pulling Sarah aside briefly to warn her about stirring up trouble. You're playing with fire here, he said quietly. Are you sure this is worth it? Sarah looked him straight in the eye. Yes, sir, it is. By the end of the night, Sarah and Marcus had compiled enough evidence to justify holding Grayson longer. Though they knew the battle was far from over, they felt a flicker of hope. Somewhere in those documents and files lay the truth, and they were determined to bring it to light, no matter the cost. For now, all they could do was stay vigilant and prepare for whatever came next. The next morning, the precinct buzzed with an uneasy energy. Word of Deputy Chief Grayson's detention had spread like wildfire, and officers who usually joked around or shared stories during coffee breaks now moved in tense silence. Conversations were hushed, eyes darted suspiciously, and the air felt heavy with unspoken accusations. Sarah and Marcus could feel the weight of those stares as they walked through the halls, their steps deliberate but cautious. They knew they were walking a tightrope. One wrong move and everything could come crashing down. In the evidence room, Sarah and Marcus pored over the documents again, piecing together the puzzle bit by bit. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Grayson wasn't working alone. Names of prominent officials, Timestamps of illegal activities and cryptic codes hinted at a web of corruption so vast it reached far beyond the police department. There were mentions of bribes paid to judges, kickbacks funneled through shell companies, and even references to organized crime syndicates operating under the radar. It was overwhelming, but also terrifying. "This isn't just about Grayson," Sarah murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's the tip of the iceberg." Marcus nodded grimly, flipping through another folder. "Whoever's behind this has been covering their tracks for years. We're talking about people with power, real power. If we push too hard." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Both of them understood the risks. Exposing corruption at this level wouldn't just end careers, it could destroy lives. And yet turning a blind eye wasn't an option either. Every instinct they had as officers told them to keep going, no matter how dangerous it got. As they worked, the pressure mounted. Anonymous messages continued flooding their phones, each one more threatening than the last. "Back off, or you'll regret it. You're playing a game you can't win. Think about your families." The words gnawed at them, planting seeds of doubt they desperately tried to ignore. But the worst part wasn't the threats. It was the growing sense of isolation. Fellow officers who once stood shoulder to shoulder with them now treated them like outsiders. Some outright avoided them while others shot them cold, disapproving looks. Even Captain Hayes, who had always supported them, seemed distant, his usual warmth replaced by a guarded caution. "Do you think anyone will back us if things go south?" Marcus asked one afternoon, leaning back in his chair and rubbing his temples. His face was pale, dark circles forming under his eyes from lack of sleep. Sarah hesitated before answering. She wanted to reassure him, to say that justice would prevail and the truth would set them free. But she couldn't bring herself to lie. "I don't know," she admitted softly, "but we can't stop now. Not when we're this close." Her determination bolstered Marcus, at least for a moment. Together they decided to take a calculated risk. Knowing they couldn't trust anyone within the department, they turned to someone outside it. An old friend of Sarah's named Elena Torres, an investigative journalist known for her fearless exposés on government corruption. Sarah hadn't spoken to Elena in years, but she trusted her implicitly. After a brief phone call, Elena agreed to meet them discreetly at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. The meeting was tense. Elena listened intently as Sarah outlined what they'd discovered, her sharp eyes scanning the copies of documents they'd brought along. When Sarah finished speaking, Elena sat back, exhaling slowly. "This is huge," she said finally. "If even half of this is true, it could blow the lid off the entire system. That's why we need your help," Sarah said earnestly. "We can't do this alone. If we leak some of this information to the public, it might force the higher-ups to act. At the very least, it'll make it harder for them to sweep it under the rug." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "I can write a story, but I'll need more proof, something concrete that ties Grayson directly to these crimes. Otherwise, it'll just be dismissed as hearsay." "We'll get you what you need," Marcus promised, though his voice wavered slightly. He knew how risky it was to involve the media, but he also knew they were running out of options. Over the next few days, Sarah and Marcus worked tirelessly to gather irrefutable evidence. They planted recording devices in Grayson's holding cell, hoping to catch him admitting to his involvement in the corruption scheme. It was a bold move, one that pushed the boundaries of protocol, but they justified it by reminding themselves of the greater good. Meanwhile, they continued to document every step they took, creating a paper trail to protect themselves if things went sideways. Grayson, however, wasn't making it easy. During interrogations, he remained infuriatingly calm, deflecting questions with practiced ease. His lawyer, Daniel Pierce, hovered like a shadow, ensuring no misstep occurred on their end. Every time Sarah or Marcus pressed him for answers, Grayson simply smiled thinly and said, "You're wasting your time. You'll see soon enough." Despite his composure, cracks began to show. Late one night, while being transferred between rooms, Grayson muttered something under his breath to one of his associates, a detective named Ryan Cole, who had been quietly visiting him under the guise of routine checks. Unbeknownst to Grayson, the conversation was captured on tape. "You need to stall them," Grayson hissed, his voice low but urgent. "Buy us time. I've already contacted Judge Hargrove. He'll issue a restraining order if necessary." Ryan nodded nervously. "And if that doesn't work?" Grayson's expression hardened. "Then we escalate. No loose ends." When Sarah and Marcus reviewed the recording the next day, their blood ran cold. Escalation meant only one thing: violence. Someone was willing to go to extreme lengths to protect this secret, and they were standing directly in the line of fire. "We can't stay here," Marcus said, suddenly pacing the room. "If they're planning something, we're sitting ducks in the precinct." Sarah agreed, her mind racing. "We'll have to split up. You take the flash drive and hide it somewhere safe. I'll stay behind and keep digging. If anything happens, to me at least, the evidence will still be out there." "No way," Marcus shot back immediately. "I'm not leaving you alone in this mess. We stick together. That's the only way we'll make it through." Their argument was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. Captain Hayes appeared in the doorway, his face unreadable. "A word, detectives," he said curtly, gesturing for them to follow him. They exchanged a glance, dread settling in their stomachs. Whatever Hayes wanted, it couldn't be good. As they trailed after him, Sarah clutched the flash drive tightly in her pocket, praying they hadn't made a fatal mistake. By the end of the day, the stakes had never felt higher. Every decision they made carried consequences that rippled far beyond their control. Yet despite the fear gnawing at them, Sarah and Marcus refused to give up. They had come too far to turn back now, and deep down, they both believed that exposing the truth was worth any price they might have to pay. The meeting with Captain Hayes took place in his office, a small, dimly lit room cluttered with stacks of files and framed commendations lining the walls. The air was thick with tension as Sarah and Marcus sat across from him, their bodies rigid, hands clasped tightly in their laps. Hayes leaned forward on his desk, his elbows resting on a pile of paperwork, his expression unreadable. "Look," he began, his voice low but firm. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You too have stepped into something bigger than you realize. Bigger than all of us." Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Sir, we're just doing our jobs. We found evidence of corruption, serious corruption, and we can't ignore it." Hayes sighed heavily, rubbing his temples as if trying to stave off an impending headache. "It's not that simple, Chen. What you've uncovered doesn't just involve Grayson, it goes higher, much higher. People who pull strings behind closed doors. People who don't take kindly to being exposed." Marcus leaned forward, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "So what are you saying, that we should back down, pretend none of this happened?" "I'm saying think carefully about your next move," Hayes replied sharply, his tone carrying a note of warning. "This isn't a game. These people, they play dirty. And if you keep pushing, they'll come after you. Hard." The weight of his words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Sarah and Marcus exchanged a glance, silently reaffirming their resolve. They couldn't let fear dictate their actions, not when so much was at stake. As they left the office, Marcus muttered, under his breath, "He might as well have told us to drop it altogether." "He didn't," Sarah said firmly. "And that means there's still hope. He could have outright ordered us to stop, but he didn't. That tells me he knows we're right." Her optimism was infectious, but it wasn't enough to dispel the unease creeping into every corner of their lives. Over the next few days, the pressure only intensified. Anonymous threats escalated, moving beyond vague warnings to specific details about their routines, where they parked their cars, which coffee shop they frequented, even the names of their family members. Someone was watching them closely, and it was clear they meant business. One evening, as Marcus drove home, he noticed a black SUV tailing him. He tried to shake it off, taking random turns through side streets and doubling back, but the vehicle stayed glued to his bumper. His heart pounded as he finally pulled into a crowded gas station, hoping the presence of other people would deter whoever was following him. When he got out of the car pretending to check the tires, the SUV slowed down momentarily before speeding away. Though no one approached him, the message was clear. They were being watched. Meanwhile, Sarah faced her own test of loyalty. Late one night, she received a call from Detective Ryan Cole, the same officer who had been visiting Grayson under suspicious circumstances. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Detective Chen, I need to talk to you. Alone. Meet me at the old warehouse on 7th Street in 20 minutes. Please, it's important." Sarah hesitated, her instincts screaming that this could be a trap. But curiosity, and the possibility that Ryan might provide crucial information, won out. She grabbed her flashlight and headed to the location, keeping her hand close to her weapon. When she arrived, Ryan was pacing nervously near the entrance, his face pale and drawn. "You shouldn't have come here," he blurted out as soon as he saw her. "They know I'm talking to you." "Who knows?" Sarah demanded, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "Grayson's people," Ryan whispered. "They're offering me immunity if I help them discredit you and Reed. They want me to say you planted the evidence against Grayson." Sarah stared at him, her mind racing. "Are you going to do it?" Ryan shook his head vehemently. "No. I may not be perfect, but I won't lie under oath, not for them, not anymore." He handed her a folded piece of paper. "This is a list of names, people involved in Grayson's scheme. Some of them are cops, others are politicians. Take it, use it wisely." Before Sarah could thank him, Ryan turned and hurried away, disappearing into the shadows. She stood there for a moment, clutching the paper tightly, her heart pounding. This new lead could change everything, but it also made her a bigger target. Back. At the precinct, tensions reached a breaking point. Marcus, overwhelmed by stress and fear, slipped away during lunch to meet with Daniel Pierce, Grayson's lawyer. He told himself it was just to hear what the man had to say, to gauge whether there was any way out of the mess they were in. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. The weight of the investigation, the isolation, the constant threats, it was all becoming too much. Pierce greeted him with a smug smile, ushering him into a private conference room. "Officer Reed," he said smoothly, "I hear you've been having a tough time lately. Let me make things easier for you. Drop the case, and I'll ensure your career remains intact. In fact, I can guarantee a promotion within the year. All you have to do is walk away." For a moment, Marcus considered it. The offer was tempting, a chance to escape the chaos and reclaim some semblance of normalcy. But as he thought about Sarah, about the evidence they'd worked so hard to gather, guilt gnawed at him. Could he really betray her like that? In the end, Marcus declined the deal, though not without hesitation. As he left the meeting, Pierce's parting words echoed in his mind. "Think carefully, Officer Reed. Loyalty is a dangerous thing when placed in the wrong hands." When Marcus returned to the precinct, Sarah confronted him immediately. She had seen the security footage of him entering the building where Pierce's office was located. Her eyes burned with betrayal. "What were you thinking?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "Do you realize how much danger you put us in?" "I didn't sell us out," Marcus shot back, defensive but ashamed. "I went there to see what they were offering, okay? To understand what we're up against." "So you admit it, you thought about backing out?" Sarah said, her voice cutting through him like a knife. "After everything we've been through, you seriously considered abandoning me?" Marcus looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "I panicked, all right? I'm sorry. But I didn't take the deal, I couldn't." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Sarah exhaled slowly, her shoulders slumping. "I need to trust you, Marcus. If we're going to get through this, I have to trust you." "You can," Marcus said earnestly, stepping closer. "I messed up, I won't deny that. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Though their partnership was strained, they knew they couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. The stakes were too high, and the clock was ticking. With Elena Torres preparing to publish her exposé, and Grayson growing increasingly desperate, they had to stay united, or risk losing everything. That night, as they sat together in the evidence room reviewing the latest documents, Sarah broke the silence. "We've come too far to turn back now," she said softly. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." Marcus nodded. determination replacing the doubt in his eyes. Together they vowed to see the investigation through to the end, even if it meant risking everything they held dear. The clock was ticking, and Sarah and Marcus knew they were running out of time. Every second that passed brought them closer to a confrontation they weren't sure they could survive. Grayson's lawyer, Daniel Pierce, had already filed motions, demanding his client's immediate release, citing illegal detention and fabricated evidence. Meanwhile, Elena Torres's exposé was nearly ready to go live, but it wasn't enough. They needed rock-solid proof, something undeniable that would tie Grayson directly to the corruption scheme and make it impossible for anyone to discredit their findings. Sarah sat at her desk late one night, staring at the list of names Cole had given her. Each name represented another thread in the tangled web of corruption, but connecting those threads required more than just speculation. It required evidence. She glanced at Marcus, who was pacing nervously nearby, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The weight of everything they'd uncovered pressed down on them both like an invisible force. "We need to get inside Grayson's head," Sarah said suddenly, breaking the silence. "If we can catch him slipping up, admitting something incriminating, we'll have what we need." Marcus stopped pacing and turned to look at her. "You mean bug his cell again? We're already pushing our luck with that." "It's not just about bugging him," Sarah replied, her voice low but intense. "We need to provoke him. Make him think he's cornered. People say things when they're desperate." It was a risky plan, but Marcus nodded slowly. "All right, but how do we pull it off without tipping him off?" They spent hours devising a strategy, carefully planning every detail. Early the next morning, Sarah requested a private meeting with Grayson under the guise of discussing potential charges against him. When she entered the interrogation room, Grayson looked up from his chair, his expression unreadable but tinged with irritation. "What is this?" he asked sharply, leaning back in his seat. "I thought my lawyer made it clear I'm not answering any questions." "This isn't about questioning you," Sarah said calmly, taking the seat across from him. "This is about giving you a chance to explain yourself before things spiral further out of control." Grayson raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Explain myself for what, running a red light?" Sarah ignored his sarcasm and leaned forward slightly, her tone measured but firm. "For starters, let's talk about the ledger we found in your car. The one detailing illegal transactions involving city funds, or the wiretap transcripts linking you to organized crime figures." Grayson's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her face, searching for signs of bluffing. When he finally spoke, his voice was icy. "You're playing a dangerous game, Detective Chen. Do you really think dragging my name through the mud will end well for you?" "It's not about dragging your name through the mud," Sarah countered. "It's about uncovering the truth, and right now all signs point to you being knee-deep in corruption." Grayson chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. This goes far beyond me. If you keep digging, you'll find yourself buried alongside me." His words sent a chill down Sarah's spine, but she refused to let him see her fear. "Then tell me who else is involved. Give us names and maybe, just maybe, you'll walk away from this with some semblance of dignity." Grayson's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment Sarah thought he might crack, but then his expression hardened again, and he leaned back, in his chair, crossing his arms. "I've said enough." As Sarah left the room, she exchanged a glance with Marcus, who was monitoring the audio feed from the observation booth. Though Grayson hadn't outright confessed, his reaction confirmed what they already suspected. He was deeply entrenched in the corruption and terrified of being exposed. With Grayson's cryptic warning still ringing in their ears, Sarah and Marcus decided to take another bold step. Knowing they couldn't trust anyone within the department, they agreed to leak select pieces of evidence to Elena Torres. It was a calculated risk. They needed public pressure to prevent Grayson's allies from burying the case quietly, but it also put a target on their backs. Elena worked quickly, publishing a series of articles that sent shockwaves through the city. The first piece focused on the embezzlement scandal, naming several high-ranking officials implicated in the scheme. The second revealed the existence of illegal wiretaps targeting journalists and activists, sparking outrage among civil rights groups. By the time the third article hit the headlines, protests erupted outside City Hall, demanding accountability and transparency. The backlash was immediate. Calls flooded the precinct, demanding answers. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves from Grayson, while internal affairs investigators began circling like vultures. Even Captain Hayes seemed rattled, calling Sarah and Marcus into his office to warn them once again about the dangers of their actions. "You've lit a firestorm," he said grimly, "and I hope you're prepared for the fallout." But Sarah and Marcus weren't backing down. With each new revelation, the walls around Grayson began to crumble. Yet even as the tide turned in their favor, cracks started forming in their partnership. Marcus's earlier meeting with Pierce lingered between them, casting a shadow over their collaboration. Sarah tried to focus on the mission, but doubt gnawed at her. Could she truly rely on Marcus when it mattered most? Their fragile alliance was tested further when Grayson's people escalated their tactics. One evening, as Sarah walked to her car after leaving the precinct, she noticed someone lurking nearby. Her heart raced as she reached for her weapon, but before she could react, the figure stepped into the light. It was Ryan Cole. "Detective Chen," he whispered urgently, glancing over his shoulder. "You need to leave town. They're coming. For you." "Who's coming for me?" Sarah demanded, gripping her flashlight tightly. Ryan hesitated, his face pale. "I overheard them talking. They're planning to silence you permanently, tonight." Before Sarah could press him for more details, Ryan disappeared into the shadows, leaving her shaken. She called Marcus immediately, relaying the warning. Together, they agreed to lay low for the night, holing up in a safe house Marcus had arranged weeks earlier as a precaution. As they sat in the dimly lit living room of the safe house, the reality of their situation hit them hard. They were fugitives in their own city, hunted by powerful forces determined to protect their secrets. Yet despite the fear and exhaustion, there was a flicker of resolve in their eyes. They had come too far to give up now. "We'll finish this," Sarah said firmly, breaking the silence. "No matter what it takes." Marcus nodded, his voice steady. Together. By dawn, they had devised a final plan. Using the recordings from Grayson's cell, the documents they'd gathered, and the flash drive containing irrefutable evidence, they prepared to expose the corruption once and for all. Their only hope was that the truth would be loud enough to drown out the lies and that justice would prevail before it was too late. The sun had barely risen when Sarah and Marcus made their move. Armed with the evidence they had painstakingly gathered, they knew this was their last chance to expose the corruption that had festered within the department for years. They couldn't afford any mistakes, not now, not when the stakes were life and death. Their plan was simple but risky. They would release all the evidence publicly in one massive disclosure. The recordings from Grayson's cell, the classified documents, the wiretap transcripts, and even Ryan Cole's list of names, all of it would be handed over to Elena Torres, who had agreed to air everything live on her news channel during prime time. It was a gamble, but they believed the public outcry would force the higher-ups to act before Grayson's allies could bury the story. As they uploaded the files onto a secure drive, Sarah glanced at Marcus, her expression tense but resolute. "Once this goes live, there's no turning back," she said softly. "We'll either win or lose everything." Marcus nodded, his jaw set firmly. "We've come too far to stop now. Let's finish what we started." With the evidence ready, they contacted Elena, who was waiting anxiously at her studio. She promised to broadcast the exposé that evening, ensuring maximum viewership. As soon as the call ended, Sarah and Marcus went silent, each lost in their thoughts. This was it, the moment they had been working toward for weeks. There was no room for error, no margin for failure. Meanwhile, chaos erupted behind the scenes. Grayson, realizing his empire was crumbling, became increasingly desperate. From his holding cell, he made frantic calls to anyone who might still listen, pleading for help. His lawyer, Daniel Pierce, worked tirelessly to file injunctions and block the release of the evidence, but it was too late. The wheels were already in motion. By midday, rumors of the impending exposé began spreading like wildfire. Officers, whispered nervously in the hallways of the precinct. Unsure whether to side with Grayson or distance themselves entirely, some tried to reach out to Sarah and Marcus, offering support or warnings, but the two detectives remained focused, refusing to engage with anyone outside their trusted circle. That afternoon, Captain Hayes summoned them to his office one final time. His face was pale, his usual composure shattered. "You've done enough damage," he said hoarsely, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "Do you realize what you're about to unleash? Careers will be ruined. Lives will be destroyed." "We know," Sarah replied evenly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "But isn't that better than letting this rot continue? How many more people have to suffer because of Grayson and his cronies?" Hayes opened his mouth to argue, but closed it again, defeated. He sank into his chair, rubbing his temples as if trying to stave off an oncoming headache. For the first time, Sarah saw him not as a superior officer but as a man caught between loyalty and morality, a man who had chosen silence over justice for far too long. As evening approached, Sarah and Marcus watched nervously from the safe house as Elena's program aired live. The opening segment was explosive, featuring excerpts from the recordings where Grayson discussed illegal activities with his associates. The screen then cut to images of the incriminating documents, highlighting names of officials involved in embezzlement, bribery, and ties to organized crime. Viewers gasped audibly as familiar faces flashed across the screen: judges, politicians, even high-ranking police officers. Within minutes, social media exploded with outrage. Hashtags calling for accountability trended nationwide, and phone lines at City Hall lit up with demands for resignations. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, chanting slogans and holding signs that read, "Justice now." The pressure mounted rapidly, leaving Grayson's allies scrambling to save face. Back at the precinct, the atmosphere was electric. Officers who had once avoided Sarah and Marcus now approached them cautiously, some apologizing for doubting them, others simply expressing admiration for their courage. Even Captain Hayes seemed to soften, acknowledging quietly that they had done the right thing, even if it came at great personal cost. Grayson, however, was a different story. When the full weight of the expose hit him, he crumbled completely. Confronted with irrefutable proof of his crimes, he lashed out in rage, shouting accusations and threats until he was finally subdued by guards. By the end of the night, he and several of his accomplices were formally charged with corruption, conspiracy, and abuse of power. The fallout was immense. Dozens of officials resigned or were arrested, and investigations spread to other departments, uncovering even more layers of corruption. It was a reckoning long overdue, sparked by the bravery of two ordinary officers who refused to look away. For Sarah and Marcus, the victory was bittersweet. While they were hailed as heroes by the public, their actions came at a price. Internal affairs launched an inquiry into their methods, questioning whether planting recording devices and leaking evidence violated protocol. Both faced disciplinary hearings, though neither regretted their choices. In the months that followed, life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could get after such upheaval. Sarah and Marcus remained partners, their bond stronger than ever despite the challenges they had faced. Though their future in law enforcement remained uncertain, they found solace in knowing they had stood up for what was right. One evening, as they sat together at a quiet diner celebrating the end of the investigation, Marcus raised his coffee mug in a toast. "To doing the right thing," he said with a small smile. Sarah clinked her mug against his, her eyes reflecting both pride and relief. "To justice," she replied. And in that moment, surrounded by the hum of conversation and the warmth of shared triumph, they allowed themselves to hope for a future where integrity mattered more than power and where truth truly did prevail.